So today we are finally wrapping up Milton. So book 9 and 10 of Paradise Lost. We'll also take a quick peek today at the very end of book 12 just to see how this thing ends with Adam and Eve leaving the garden. When God kicks them out. God doesn't kick them out. Christ does in Milton's telling. Of course, depends on how you separate the Trinity, I suppose. But we'll take a quick look at the end of book 12 today as well. So lots of stuff going on in this section. I am very glad we read book 5 and 6 the other day, though, because I do think that it helps add a lot of nuance to 9 and 10 when all the action takes place. The only thing I wish we could have done is a little bit of book 8, because in book 8 we get Adam's accounting of Eve's creation. Like, you get a little bit of character development for Adam there on how he feels so lonely and how he doesn't feel how he felt so lonely in Eden, and it's almost to a point of despair. So that helps add a little bit to his character about why he gets suckered by Eve, to use a loaded term here, right? Why he falls victim to her wily charms. Right? He can't imagine life without her, right? So that's, she's literally the only woman on earth here. So, he imagines the despair of being by himself again. He does have that memory of what it was like to be by himself. So lots of stuff happening here, to say the least. Hold on one sec. So where to begin then? We can talk about how a lot of these character arcs is all Adam, Eve, Satan, sin and death. How what Eden is like in post-lapsarian after the fall compared to pre-lapsarian before the fall. We can talk about how Christ comes down. Again, instead of the Genesis story, it's where God the Father comes down. It's Christ who comes down to judge them. Where to begin then? I'll just open the floor up to you guys. What was your thoughts on how Paradise Lost ends? The camera went to you, Dale, so I guess you're first up.
I enjoyed it from everything I've read of it so far. It's just, I thought it was interesting he chose to have Christ come down instead of God, because in the Old Testament that's not even hinted at. Milton has a very I don't like how much blame he puts on Eve in this story, though. I hate this story to begin with, but I hate it even worse here. I just think it's just a silly reason to have mankind fall. Is the best way to put it. But here it's even worse because Eve gets basically all the blame. You said her wily charm. I don't know.
I agree with you, Dale. And, I think I'm probably not right, but I kind of have an idea on why Milton wrote in that Jesus is the one that expelled them from paradise or the garden rather than God. And I think it was to contribute to the view of God being a passive ruler and as being unjustly worshipped. I think is kind of how I took it from the context of the book.
So if God lets Jesus do it all, like that takes, are you saying that takes the heat off God?
Yeah, pretty much. And also just kind of contributing to the thought that God really hasn't actively done anything as far as like, manual labor, which I don't know, God might not even have to do manual labor, but, doesn't lift his weight as much as the others, I guess you could say, as far as the context goes.
Yeah, but if you're to interpret it as they're one and the same, it's really just an extension of him to begin with.
That is another way to look at it. I hadn't considered that.
Right. Yeah, if we think about it as the Holy Trinity, right, instead of them being three separate entities, God, Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Right. If you look at it from the Trinity, they are one and the same. That's an interesting concept in itself, theological concept in itself, to try to wrap your mind around, because normally when we think about Christianity, we think about them being all three different entities, which is kind of strange too, because Christianity is a monotheistic religion. That's an interesting web in itself to untangle.
It really doesn't bother them though, because they consider it one and the same, even though it is, mono, like you said. I do like here, because you don't see this a whole lot in the Bible. I like the how there's a nuance to God literally talking to Jesus during the war in heaven. I know that's going back a couple books, but I really appreciated that. I really like that.
Well, when God's giving him instructions in like book 6 or something.
Yeah, and come to find out that he gave Jesus all the glory, and that was actually the reason for the uprising to begin with. Because in the Bible, it's the devil it's basically over the creation of man. He feels jealous over that. Here, it's rooted in, he ends up hating humans, but just out of spite to God.
Right. Yeah, so let's take the conversation to start out with Eve. Let's start with Eve. You started us down this path, Dale, so let's go down it. So yeah, we have some very interesting passages of good old classic Renaissance misogyny in this part of the text. Of course, we have the whole passage where Satan seduces Eve in the garden, right? He appeals. How does he seduce her? Right? He appeals to her vanity, right? And of course, we learned. I planted that seed for you when we talked about book 4, right? Because Eve looks into the pool and falls in love with her own reflection, right? So, so that's how Satan gets her in Paradise Lost, through her vanity. And that is not a detail that's in the Bible, in the Genesis story, right? So the Genesis story is actually pretty vague about like how stuff happens. So Milton this is almost like historical fiction or something, right? With how Milton kind of tries to like fill in the details with the classic Genesis story.
Yeah, it's really nuanced here too. And I think the reason the Bible doesn't talk about it a whole lot, now you could say it's because God literally told him what to write, but the more details you add to it, the quicker it starts unraveling, right, in my opinion. But I love how Eve tells Adam, because he's giving her down the road for doing this. She's like, are you saying that you're better than me? What if you would have been there instead of me? Are you saying that wouldn't have happened regardless? I think it probably would have. She tells him as much.
Yeah, if Eve would have listened, if she would have stuck with Adam in the garden, knowing that Satan was out there, instead of being so, instead of wanting her independence and all this stuff, right? She wants to be a strong woman, right? But she wants to be able to work by herself, have her own personal space, right? If she wouldn't have done that, would everything have been okay?
Dr. Yeager, are you implying she should have stayed in the kitchen?
That's perhaps what I'm asking here, right?
I think, I don't know, did y'all catch on, it was in book 9 on page 1897, where Satan is kind of like following her and really figuring out what he's going to do. It's on line 483. Or 482 it starts. Her husband, for I view far around, not nigh, whose high intellect more I shun. And I really, honestly, that pissed me off. I was like, why is she less intelligent than Adam? I mean, does having a vagina make you less intelligent? Because not to my knowledge. And I also had a thought, because on page 1892, starting on line 232, he goes, for nothing lovelier can be found in woman than to study household good and good works in her husband to promote. And I really think the reason that Satan targeted Eve was, one, because, she was portrayed as being less intelligent, but also because I think it would have been more hurtful to God having a being who was meant to be subservient, submissive, be the one to really kind of rebel, I guess you could say. Even though it wasn't an act of choice and it was a trick, I still feel that would be, I don't know, I guess you could say more hurtful in Satan's eyes and maybe in God's eyes. What do y'all think?
I mean, that's possible, or he was just, he knew how weak man was to win the woman's influence, or so it reads here. She appealed to his carnal desires, and that's how she ultimately got him to partake in eating the fruit. But then he turned around and obviously blamed her and said he was never at fault.
That's true. Do y'all think that if Adam would have been the one to initially eat the fruit, that Eve would have followed?
Yeah, I don't think it would have mattered.
Maybe not, though. Maybe not. Remember that Eve isn't like when Eve's creation. She doesn't want to follow Adam. She wants to follow herself. She wants to be with herself. So perhaps not. Just throwing devil's advocate out there.
Do you think she would have told on Adam if she wasn't the one that ate the apple?
I don't know, Hannah. What do you think?
I think maybe that she would have, if she loved herself that much. She's like, well, I can have this garden to myself, and I can continue to love only myself.
That would have been a lot more intriguing.
Because
honestly, if somebody came and wrote a fiction book like that, I would love it.
Because didn't back then they painted women as like being vixens sometimes and untrustworthy.
Right.
Yeah, and that question that you asked the other day, Dr. Yeager, about how this contributes to modern views on Christianity, I think that's one of the biggest ones. After reading through this, I think the demonization of women is one of the biggest things that this text has contributed to all of Christianity. Although it was there before, I just think that this kind of cemented it a bit.
What are you trying to say?
I think that the way that Eve is painted out as almost the villain, though you could argue against it, I think that it contributes to, well, she's not painted as the villain, but how she is, takes on the accountability for man's downfall. And also just the way that she's painted in this, I think that it contributes to the Christian view that women are deceitful and untrustworthy.
Let's anchor this in the text a little bit. Let's go to book 10, line 867. 867. The line might be slightly off in you guys' version, but around line 867 of book 10. This is the famous passage where Adam kind of takes Eve down the road for what she's done. It starts out with, "Out of my sight, thou serpent. Out of my sight, thy serpent." It says, that name best befits thee with him leagued, thyself as false and hateful. Nothing wants but that thy shape, like his in color serpentine, may show thy inward fraud to warn all creatures from thee. Henceforth, lest that too heavenly form pretended the hellish falsehood snare them. But for thee I had persisted happy, had not thy pride and wandering vanity, when least was safe, rejected my forewarning, and disdained not to be trusted, longing to be seen, though by the devil himself, him overweening to overreach. With the serpent meeting fooled and beguiled, by him thou, I by thee, to trust thee from my side, imagined wise, constant, mature, proof against all assaults, and understood not all was but a show rather than solid virtue, all but a rib crooked by nature, bent, as now appears more to the part sinister from me drawn. Well, have thrown out a supernumerary to my just number found. Oh, why did God, creator wise, that people highest heaven with spirits masculine, create at last this novelty on earth, this fair defect of nature, and not fill thy world at once with men as angels, without feminine, or find some other way to generate mankind? This mischief had not then befallen, and more than shall befall. Innumerable disturbances on earth through female snares in straight conjunction with this sex. For either he never shall find out fit mate, but such as some misfortune brings him, or mistake, or whom he wishes most shall seldom gain through her perverseness, but shall see her gained by a fair worse, or if she love withheld by parents, or his happiest choice too late, shall meet already linked in wedlock bound to a fell adversary, his hate or shame, which infinite calamity shall cause the human life and household peace confound. What does that do? That just makes Eve cry, right? But why did God have to create these femme fatales, right? Why did he have to create them, right? Why couldn't was it Paradise just have been men hanging out watching football, right?
That sounds awful.
Right? I don't know which passage in classic Renaissance lit is worse for misogyny, that or some of the passages in King Lear, right? Some of the passages in King Lear we read were pretty out there too.
Could it be argued that it's not Milton being misogynistic, that he's just trying to interpret the Bible how he's seen it, that doesn't really convey how he feels? You know what I mean?
From my understanding of Milton's probably the author in this class I know the most about, just because I actually took a grad course on Milton once. But I do know that he had gone through a pretty bad divorce right around the time that he was writing Paradise Lost. So do with that what you will.
Did that divorce contribute any to his kind of being thrown out of the society at that point?
No, I think he felt abandoned because she left him right around the time he went blind and stuff. So there was a lot of bitterness there, probably. I don't think his divorce had anything to do with his disgrace. His disgrace had to do with his politics.
Yeah, because he was Cromwell's lackey, right?
Yeah. Yeah, Milton and Oliver Cromwell was hated so bad that after his death, the people dug his corpse up and hung his corpse again. Right? That's how hated Oliver Cromwell was in England. Milton too. They dug Milton up too again. So I don't even know where Milton's bones are now, but I do know they dug him up again.
Well, at least with Milton, though, history looks back fondly on him, though.
Yeah, as a great writer, at least. Cromwell, not so much. And yeah, well, anything left to say here about Eve and her and the blame that she takes here? I'm
Well,
curious.
she never should have been blamed to begin with, but they shouldn't have ever been put in this situation to begin with. I swear, just the idea of somebody, just imagine a parent telling a kid, because you can look at them like toddlers in this very easily, saying no, giving no context really why, other than you just don't touch that, don't eat that, trust me. What are they going to do? If you have all eternity, you're eventually going to do it.
And I really, even in the way that it's written, even if by chance you took it as close to fact as you could, I still don't even think it's Eve's fault, because you have to think, so say I had a box of ants or something, and they were living in paradise, happy as could be. I'd get bored. I'd get pretty damn bored after a little bit, and I might want to throw a wasp in there or something to make them all fight or something. I mean, this is what I think. I think God got bored watching them farm. Imagine sitting there watching a farm simulator. That'd get pretty damn boring. And he says, oh, well, they're going to fall, and then we're going to have wars and chaos and racism and genocide and all kinds of bad things. And it's not my fault, because I still love them.
Right. Going back to book 5 and 6, if God wouldn't have sent Raphael down to warn them, do you think that they would be as to blame here?
I honestly, I still don't think they're to blame at all. I mean, you could argue that, but hey, he sent down an emissary and he told them, hey, don't do this. It's still, the fault lies with the creator. I'd like to hear some other people's thoughts on that. But it's clear how me and Nicole feel.
Right.
It's kind of like telling you. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. Go
It's
ahead.
kind of like having a child. They get candy or something. You're like, don't touch that, because you might hurt yourself. Especially on Halloween, when you're like, you don't know what's in that. Don't eat that, and they're still gonna do it anyways, because they don't know. They're like, well, let's see what happens.
Right. Human nature, curiosity, and all that good stuff. Right.
Yeah, I mean, to go back on what Nicole said, I think that it shows human nature and that everybody can make their own choices. I don't think that God got bored. I think it shows that even back to the beginning of time, how we're all tempted and how we have the choice to either make that decision or to turn against it.
I agree, Kara. And I also think that I said in my discussion post that I do agree that it would be hard to refrain from doing something that you were told to not do. We struggle with that every day. But had she not been approached by Satan, I think that she wouldn't have even thought about touching the tree, because sin hadn't entered their lives yet. Like, she wouldn't have been tempted with that. She would have never been told that, what the tree could give her. So I don't think that they would have even thought of it. And I think that Satan is sneaky and creepy, and he is described as a snake in this story and also in Genesis. And I don't like snakes, so I'm going to stay as far away from them as I can. But the fact that Satan had to wait for Eve to be by herself kind of showed me that, if Adam would have been with her, I don't think that she would have eaten the fruit, because Adam probably had a closer relationship with God, because he was directly formed by God. Like Eve was too, but Eve was kind of made from Adam as well. So I think that Adam was closer to God, and he was more interested in following God than anything else. And I think that if Eve would have been with Adam, then maybe the situation would have been different. If that made sense. I hope it did, but
It makes sense. I'm just going to throw this out there. Does anyone in here think that the portrayal of women in the Bible and in this is anywhere near accurate, even just a little bit? Just general question.
I don't think so. I think that we all have a role in life, and whether that be to stay home and take care of your family or go out and work to help provide for your family, I think either role is equally important, because if you don't have someone at home helping with the kids or fixing dinner, like, you're either not going to eat or your kids are not going to be developmentally ready for school or the world in general. So I don't think that God intentionally created women to be however you might perceive them to be. Like, I really think that as a woman, we are allowed to be independent. We are allowed to do things on our own and, have a mind of our own, go get a job if we want to, stay at home if we want to. But I think that in life, it's whatever God calls you to do. And I just don't think God created anyone to be unequal. Like, we all have a specific purpose in life.
I totally agree with you, and that's and I liked everything you had to say, but I think that's because God had nothing to do with any of it, and it was because of evolution. I know it's a hot take right there, but that's just my opinion.
Well, the two views can be linked together, right? I mean, you can make the argument that if creation was the thing, that God might have set that evolutionary process into motion, right? So you can make that argument, Dale.
That's why I remain open-minded, Dr. Yeager. I'm not set in my beliefs firmly, because I feel like that's a very bad way to live life.
Right.
If there was good literature and somebody, taught in a nuanced way that make me think what you just said was true, I'm not saying I wouldn't be up to thinking like that per se someday. But I don't consider myself an atheist either. I do think there's something bigger than me, and I don't know what that is per se. That could just be the galaxy itself. Questions to answers I don't have.
You're a deist.
Questions I don't have.
You're a deist, just like Ben Franklin, right? That's what you have the same philosophy on religion as Ben Franklin did. Yeah, that's a discussion. One of the things I'd love to go over in American Lit class is how the founding fathers really weren't Christians, right? They were most of them all were very deists, like they believed in something, but it wasn't necessarily Christianity. Like Franklin and Jefferson, that's definitely true of those two. The next time somebody tells you that America was founded on Christianity, don't listen, because it's not true.
This country is literally supposed to give you freedom of and from religion.
Right.
So you should be able to practice whatever religion you like. And if you don't want to practice any, then you should be free to not do that, as long as you're not hurting anyone else or yourself.
What Jefferson and Franklin both believed. But that's a whole digression. Yeah, it's true that the Puritans founded the colonies, right? But as far as like when the nation was born in the 1770s and 1780s, that was not something that they had in mind. They looked back and saw like the witch trials and all that, and they said, no, we can't have a theocracy. We can't have a country founded on a religion.
It's teetered back and forth between seeping back into, it's always supposed to have been separate from state, but, it used to be in school. I remember having God in the Pledge of Allegiance and things like that. I think that's since been taken out. I could be wrong.
Yeah, that was a whole big battle in the 80s, if I remember. Like this, it actually went to the Supreme Court about prayer in school and all this stuff. But getting back to Paralyzed Lost, we talked about the snake. So here's another deviation from the Bible. The snake is actually an innocent creature in Paradise Lost. Right? It's just a creature hanging out and eating like any other creature. Right? I think it actually kind of like walks around in Milton's Eden. So imagine that type of monstrosity, right? A snake with legs walking around, right? That's
Like
pretty
a lizard.
right. Right. Just
Yeah, I
like
don't mess with those either.
yeah, just like a lizard, right? And Satan possesses the snake, right? Satan doesn't like transfigure into a snake. He possesses the snake. Yeah, so here's and then in book 10, when Satan goes back down to hell and kind of gloats and celebrates, oh, we a corrupted man, right? Victory for hell. Right? God then turns them all into snakes in hell, and they slither around on their bellies. So that's if there's a example of God being spiteful in Paradise Lost, like God taking an action, that's probably the one time that he does when he turns Satan into a serpent just to slither around at the very end. That seems like an angry God move, right? But what do you guys think of this whole thing, making the snake different from Satan? Do you think it's messed up that the snake was punished, even though the snake didn't really do anything wrong? It was just possessed.
Yeah, I mean,
Absolutely.
just like you could say that humans were unjustly punished as well because it was no fault of their own. I also thought it was interesting that he chose to possess the snake, whereas he had been shown to be fully capable of shape-shifting at will. Why not just shape-shift into the snake instead of possess it?
That would perhaps be beneath his dignity, right? He's already went so far in this poem. So think if we want to track his trajectory, right? He starts out as highest of archangels. When he goes to Eden, he impersonates a cherub. Then he impersonates a toad, because that's how he gets the. It's implied that Satan's who puts this dream in Eve's head in book 5, right? This dream about her eating the apple. So he's a toad at one point. So maybe the snake is where he finally draws the line as far as being beneath him on the hierarchy of being. Right? Remember this idea of the hierarchy of being. Right? So he goes from highest of archangels to the lowest of animals through this whole thing.
I felt like from a religious point of view, I kind of felt like the symbolism of him actually possessing the snake and not turning into the snake kind of showed that all creatures, all humans can be vessels for either good or bad. Like that's kind of what I thought on it.
Yeah, I like that.
Right, so human beings or animals, perhaps.
While I definitely don't think, I'm not the biggest fan of snakes today, but I definitely hate the way that they've been demonized. Like 100%. It's their nature to bite things when they feel threatened. And yeah, they have to eat little mice and stuff, but I mean, they gotta live.
Yeah, but they are inherently creepy. I don't know if that's the right adjective to use or not, but I get why, like Kelsey said, I can see why. I mean, they look kind of like it's easy to make that link.
Oh yeah, I agree with you there. They're disturbing.
I used the adjective creepy because it was just weird. It was just creepy how he was like kind of stalking Eve. Like, does that make sense?
right?
Yeah, hey, no, I didn't know you said creepy. That wasn't me being condescending whatsoever. I chose creepy.
I didn't take it that way, but I was just wanting to. I thought that you heard me say that, and that's why I wanted to explain why.
You're exactly
Before
right,
you
Kelsey. You're exactly right, Kelsey. I mean, he is creeping around through this whole thing, right? He watches them have sex, and like he's like hiding in the bushes. He's very voyeuristic and gets jealous about it, right? He, even like being a toad, right? He's kind of like creeping around. So yeah, you're definitely right about him.
I was surprised that him being as prideful and vain as he was, I was surprised that he wasn't more outright and just blunt and straight to the point. And I understand that, he definitely could have been stopped easier that way, but it just felt like more like his nature for him to be blunt and outright about things.
Yeah, I was kind of expecting once she took a bite for him to materialize and take like his flesh form and like start tap dancing and holding his hands up.
Yeah, it's in that moment when sin and death build their bridge through chaos to Earth too. So we do get a little bit more of the chaos angle there. That's when sin and death are able to build the bridge from hell to Earth. That's the bridge that people go on when they go to hell. Right? So he actually wraps up his cosmology here. Milton wraps up his cosmology here with sin and death.
Does he ever discuss a bridge to heaven? Like, it wouldn't be through sin, but it would have to be through death. I don't know what else it would be through.
I guess it'd be through the Messiah, through Christ himself.
Right.
I'm pretty sure Milton even says that's part of them eating the apple is they now have to indulge death to be able to make it to heaven. They have to. That's part of the punishment.
Yeah, Milton actually calls the Virgin Mary the second Eve too. So like she symbolizes the rebirth of humanity into a godlike being again too.
Yeah, because everybody has to partake in death to make it to heaven. Because even in the Bible, I think Elijah's one of them. There was two that came back in Revelations as like prophets, if I remember correctly. But they were saved from death back in the day, and then they were brought back and had to die in the future, basically.
Hold on. I feel like I remember. I don't remember the name of the person, but I feel like I remember somewhere in the Bible. This is only like one or two instances where somebody literally lived such a sin-free life. They got, I can't remember the word for it, but they got like taken up.
Yeah, that's what I'm referring to. But
Oh,
even
okay.
even them, they still end up dying. But it's in Revelations, if I remember correctly.
Oh, okay.
Moses was one. He was taken up into heaven by God before they got to the promised land.
I believe it was Elisha, I think, or Elijah. I always get the two confused. But he went up in a chariot of fire. He didn't die.
No, you're absolutely right. He comes back in Revelations, though, during the time of tribulation.
If y'all want to hear a funny tidbit, the preacher at my old church, his wife, she always used to say, if I ever go missing, you don't gotta look for me. I just started living so sin-free. You took me up. You know where I am.
Man, that'd be nice.
So as far as Satan goes, are you guys absolutely extinguished? I know Dale the other day in book 5, you said you were kind of waning on the whole sympathy thing. I'm guessing by now you definitely are. Nicole, what about you? You're the sympathy for the devil advocate in here, right?
So my view on it now, his actions have made me lose 98% of my sympathy for him. I got 2% left. only because of his nature that was put in him by God to be vain and to be prideful, which led to all of it. Although after the initial fall, I think that he could have made some better choices.
What do you mean? What do you mean by better choices?
Instead of being spiteful and saying, "Oh, I'm gonna destroy all of this," saying, "Well, this is my lot here. I chose where I am, and I can be ruler of hell, and I don't have to be spiteful towards them because I don't even have to see it. I can just ignore it and be happy down here," I guess you could say.
Hey, you know what I think would be interesting? I would be curious to see what y'all think about this. If there was a retelling of this, but instead of Satan coming and absolutely screwing us over, he came and because he felt like he ruined his legion, that he's here, he came to make sure we didn't fall victim to what he fell victim to.
That would be so cool. So, like, instead of going to ensure that that humankind fall, he goes to kind of correct them of the natures that have been put into them, if they are natures that would persuade them to do something that would cause them to fall.
Yeah, something along that line. Yes, I think that'd be cool.
I would love to see, like, if something like that was ever written or made into a show or something, I'd love to see the Trinity's reaction to that.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if redemption could be found that way. Now I know, like here in Milton's, and it never does say in the Bible, correct me if I'm wrong, that he could find redemption, but that'd be interesting if he did decide to take this big leap of faith and actually did something good. But who knows?
If you guys in popular culture now, we have that TV show called Lucifer. I don't know if you guys have watched it.
I love
I'm
that
familiar
show.
with that. I like that show too.
I get you can if you're familiar with that show, you can definitely see how Milton's handprints are all over that show.
If I could interject really quick, you know what I think, Dale? I was thinking on it. I think that if Satan would have went and tried to stop humans from falling, I think that would have actually been foiling God's plan, because everything he did actually fulfilled his plan. I think that's the only way he could have really changed things up. And so I don't think he could be forgiven. I mean, I think he should be from my point of view, but I don't think that the Trinity or God would allow that to happen or would forgive him.
We're diving into some extreme hypotheticals here as far as theology goes.
Hey, my whole life's a hypothetical. That's all.
Yeah, British. It seems like British lit class has become theology class as the past couple of weeks. It seems like all the good stuff we've read, most of the good stuff we've read, though, has been about Christianity in some respect. Besides Shakespeare is probably the most secular thing we've read in here, as far as that goes. So
Yeah, I'd say so. Maybe Beowulf. Well, no, there was even Christianity in Beowulf, wasn't there?
there was. What about Adam and Paralyzed Lost? He blames Eve in this one part. He even talks about how he thinks about committing suicide at one point, right? He's like, I'd rather commit suicide than have to live like this, outside of paradise. What do you guys think of his depiction here? Is he whiny? What do you think?
I think he sounded like a total crybaby who could not take accountability for his choice to eat the apple. Even though Eve was there kind of persuading him to do it, he still chose to do that and needs to take accountability for it. And while that doesn't put all the blame on him or on Eve, it's both their faults for doing it. Well, it's not even their fault. It's Satan's fault for persuading them. But they still need to be accountable for, taking that bite.
Right. I don't disagree with you here, Nicole. I think that as far as my participation goes, I don't disagree. I think you're right. He doesn't take responsibility for his actions much here.
I agree that he isn't taking responsibility, but I'm not sure if he's being a crybaby about it. I think that he's just feeling like the deepest guilt he could feel. Like he went from this guy that was following God, doing what God wanted him to do, and then he decides to not do that, and he feels it like probably in his gut that like that was just the worst choice ever.
Right. Yeah. That's the first moment in the text where he feels complete despair, right? Yeah. That's despair, what he feels.
A question I have, whenever, I don't know, I could have looked over it in the book. It's been in the previous days we've discussed it, and in the previous parts we've read. When they get the commandment to not eat from the tree, are Adam and Eve both present? And does God actually go down there and tell them, or is it just Adam present when they're told that?
I think the moment that happens is yeah, I think they're both present for that. Yeah, now when Raphael comes down from heaven and warns them about Satan, Eve's not there for that. So Eve perhaps doesn't know the full significance of how much of a seducer that Satan is and all that, just because she didn't listen to that story.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I feel like, and this isn't putting entire blame on either or, but I feel like she can't be blamed entirely since she wasn't there when Raphael told her that, because as far as what we know of Eve so far, we know that she is independent in nature and that she does kind of go her own way a little bit and has to be guided. And Adam wasn't even her initial choice as in companion. So I feel like she would have taken it more seriously from Raphael than from Adam.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, you're definitely giving a good reading here to deflect blame off of Eve. What about returning back to book 5? What about that dream? You guys, my opinion change any on that dream after book 9 and 10? Is that dream? Do you guys still think that dream doesn't really mean she sinned, or what do you guys think?
I don't think she sinned until she actually took the bite of the apple. I don't think the dream really counts as a sin. Thinking, like, if I were to think about God here and killing somebody, that's one thing. But if I went out here and killed somebody, it's a totally different one.
I don't think she sinned, period, in this whole tale, but that takes into my overall worldview too. So
True. I mean, if I had to consider, which one was worse, I think actually eating the apple was worse, even though, it's easy. I mean, you could definitely argue and support your argument that she's not to blame for that.
Here's a question for you guys. Is Adam's sin worse than Paradise Lost? That's because Eve is duped, right, by Satan. But Adam willfully chooses to eat this apple, right? He knows it's wrong. He knows it's wrong, but he chooses. So is that the same type of sin that Satan commits, as far as like choosing his fall, right, rather than being tricked? Because that's God's whole reason for why man can be redeemed, because man's tricked, right? But is Adam really tricked?
I don't think so. And I think, taking into consideration that he was actually there when Raphael gave them all the details about Satan being there. And I think that him knowing that Eve did that was not just to go ahead for him to do it too. I also think that since he was the first human created, and kind of painted to be the head of the whole operation as far as humans go and the one guiding Eve, I think his sin was worse. Even though in God's eyes all sin are the same, I still think his was worse.
God should have learned his lesson with Adam right then and there and just done away with males.
I agree with you there, Dale. Kidding.
No, I do think that Adam is for sure more to blame than Eve is. If you're going to weigh this on some type of cosmic balance of scales, yeah, she got duped by a supernatural entity. He had been told by Raphael, and he already knew that she had been duped by Satan, and he still did it.
Well, you got to remember that persuasive demon sexuality of women, Dale. They'll get you every time.
They truly, really will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we men are definitely painted as more needy in this whole thing, right? To say the least. Yeah, Adam's like a puppy dog with separation anxiety. That's kind of what he's like. What he's like here. We should probably also go. I mentioned this when we talk about book 3 and 4. We should probably also mention this pre-lapsarian and post-lapsarian Eden in Paradise Lost. We talked about especially how that was framed through sexuality. Right? We talked about how like you guys were kind of surprised that there was actually sex happening in Eden in book 4. Well, we get. Remember the other day I made the sort of dirty joke, right? That sexuality and pre-lapsarian Eden was like the missionary position, right? Book 9, it gets pretty crazy. Go to line.
He grabs her by the hand and takes her to the riverbank there, and
yeah, go to line 1034 in book 9, 1034. We'll go over this passage. It's the one that's worth going over. It said the passage starts with, "So said he, and forbore not glance or toy of amorous intent, well understood of Eve, whose eye darted contagious fire. Her hand he seized into a shady bank, thick overhead with verdant roof embowered. He led her nothing loath. Flowers were the couch, pansies and violets and asphodel and hyacinth, earth's freshest, softest lap. There their fill of love and love's disport took largely of their mutual guilt the seal, the solace of their sin, till dewy sleep oppressed and wearied with their amorous play." So, yeah, Milton's pretty clear here that this is a different type of love making, right, than it was in pre-lapsarian. And then they wake up the next day thinking, "Oh shit, like we really messed up." Right. So I don't know. I just wanted to make mention of that. I don't know if you guys have a thought on it, but
I think, I'm not gonna lie, if it was me, I would have owned it. I ate the apple. Now I know about good and evil. Throw it at me. Throw death at me. Throw whatever. I made the choice. I'm capable of taking on the reprehensions of it.
right, you ate the apple, right? You've already sinned. Why not just roll with it, right? That's kind of what these two are like right here.
And which I think we have to remember. I just thought of this. We have to remember they didn't know that they were going to be able to be saved eventually. At that time, they weren't able to be saved. You had to live a very, very strict life, and there was no atonement to save you. There was not an easy repentance. It was a lot more difficult back then.
Right? Yeah, because time-wise, that's before God came down and gave this judgment. So
could you imagine how boring it would have been if they would have never ate that fruit? Like, holy hell, everything that we consider great in this world is due to that.
Right? Sin's fun, right? I guess Milton's showing that here, right? Sin can be fun. So yeah, the dangers of sin, right? You know, they're both very lecherous here, right? In this one part. That's another addition from the Bible, right? Go back and read the Genesis story after this class. Go back and read it. You guys will see that how much different this whole thing is.
I had a thought I wanted to run by y'all, and it's connected to the story, but it's not super connected. So it's a little bit after Genesis when God's talking about all the plants and the trees and about how, the seeds from the trees make trees like the trees that they come from, and the animals make their like to them, and so on and so forth. And if God created us, then are we not like unto God? And was God not human at one point? If, you feed into that, and if, cats make cats, dogs make dogs, so on and so forth.
I don't know what you're trying to say. I mean, because he does say that we were created in his image.
Yeah, so like that made me think maybe he was human at one time from, I don't know, another reality, or maybe that's one of the life cycles of the human soul, maybe. That's just like a general thought I wanted to throw out there. I thought, I didn't know how to feel about it. It's just something I'd thought previously.
Again, we're diving into some theological waters that I don't know if I'm qualified to answer.
Well, theory.
Yeah, I'm definitely not a doctor of theology over here. I'm the doctor of philosophy, right? Which is way worse, right?
No, I respect that more because the other one, I don't care what how high your degree is, you still don't have all the answers. There's no way.
Yeah, I would be interested to sit through seminary school though, because I'm really interested in all these questions. Right. So
I was in seminary for 2 years and 1 semester in college. And I'll tell you, the most of it is we're not supposed to know, don't ask, don't worry about it. From my personal experience.
Perhaps that's wisdom though. Perhaps that is wisdom, right? The more
think not, want not.
Perhaps there's skepticism and there's healthy skepticism, right? So
Yeah, that right there is why I don't agree with being an atheist, which it ain't that you have to agree with anybody's, but I just feel like that's a really cynical, depressive way to live your life.
right, atheism's dogmatic, just like how perhaps the most extreme of Christianity is dogmatic, right?
In my opinion, a lot of times ignorance is bliss.
Right.
Yes, absolutely.
Now, the whole message of Paradise Lost, right? Ignorance is bliss.
I would honestly, this summer, I'm probably going to go back and read through this with a really fine-tuned feminist lens. And I feel like a lot can be gained from doing a reading through that.
You didn't view this in a feminist lens this time?
Well, it wasn't fine-tuned. It was there, but it wasn't pinpointed.
Hey,
Dale,
no,
you should try being in the film class with me.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure that'd be interesting.
Yeah, our film class, everybody has a different role. Nicole's the resident feminist. We have another guy who's the resident historian of the class. So like everybody has their own role, which is fun.
Hey, I try to respect everybody's opinion because if we were all the same, this world would be really bland.
Exactly. We all have different things to contribute in different ways.
let's turn to the very end of Paradise Lost now. Just the very end of book 12, the very last stanza of the whole thing. So turn to the very end. I don't know what page it is in the text. Turn to the very end. I just wanted to read this passage. Again, book 11 and 12, those aren't book 11 and 12. That's Milton's pretty much a retelling of the whole history of Christianity. So if you guys know like what Genesis is like, this person begat this person begat this person. That's kind of like what book 11 and 12 are like here. Yeah, those two books aren't studied too much in the whole thing.
If y'all have the 3-book version of the textbook, I think it's on page 1975.
1975. Yeah, the passage I'm reading ready to read, this is the last stanza. It says, "It's so spake our mother Eve." I'll give you a second. It says, "So spake our mother Eve, and Adam heard, well pleased, but answered not. For now too nigh the archangel stood, and from the other hills their fixed station, all in bright array, the cherubim descended. On the ground gliding meteorons, as evening mist risen from a river over the marish glides, and gathers ground fast at the laborer's hill, homeward returning. High in front advanced the brandished sword of God, before them blazed, fierce as a comet, which with torrid heat and vapor as the Libyan air adjust, began to parch their temperate clime. Whereat on either hand the hastening angel called our lingering parents, and to the eastern gate led them direct. Down the cliff as fast to the subjected plain, then disappeared. They, looking back, all the eastern side beheld a paradise, so late their happy seat, waved over by that flaming brand. The gate with dreadful faces thronged and fiery arms, some natural tears they dropped, but wiped them soon. World was all before them, where to choose their place of rest, and Providence their guide. They hand in hand with wandering steps and slow, through Eden took their solitary way. Right? I've always found that passage I've always found that a very beautiful passage, right? And them leaving, they don't know where they're going, right? They still have the hand of providence over them, though, so everything's going to be okay, right? But I've always found that I don't think he could have worded that any better. Them leaving paradise and the uncertainty and looking at the future and all of that. Right? I've always found that a very compelling passage. What do you got? What's your guys' thoughts on it?
I really enjoyed it, especially the last 4 or 5 lines. It made me think, humanity, we're not sure of anything. The only thing we're sure about is that we're here together, and that we have to rely on that. And we can make it a heaven or hell here on earth.
Yeah, those last 2 lines where he says they're hand in hand, I like the symbolism of them being together on this journey.
It's a hard journey, right? He calls it the solitary way. They're going on their solitary way, right?
Yes, and like Lucifer before them, they're leaving paradise. So, it's hard to even wrap your mind around what that type of loss would be like.
Yeah, it's described there as God's kind of guarding the gate with flames, right, where they can't even get back in.
I noticed Milton chose to use the eastern side, and I've seen that throughout this text several different times, that's like the main entrance, the east side. Is there anything about why that was chosen?
I don't know anything about that. That's interesting though.
When Milton wrote this, had the Americas already been discovered?
Yeah, he wrote this in the 1660s. So yeah, the colonies were well underway. This was about the time probably where the witch trials and stuff started picking up. So about the 1660s.
Could it be because the actual physical place that the garden was believed to be was like the Eastern Hemisphere. I don't know if that's the right way to word it.
I think it'd
But
be in modern day the Middle East.
yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Well, if you go way back in linguistics, right, the idea is humanity really started in like the India area, right? And then it just kind of spread all over the place from there. Like the root language like goes all the way back to like India, and then people spread east, they spread west, and that's the theory, at least.
I don't know if you're familiar with Graham Hancock, but he theorizes that there were people in Americas 75,000 years earlier than what we thought they were. But no, I know what you're saying for sure.
And of course, it would have all been one big continent then, too, right? With Pangea. Yeah. So, what do you guys think of? So we've read the big three: Chaucer, Shakespeare, Milton. Now, right? Who's your favorite of the big three? We'll end class with that.
Mine is Milton, just because I have a really rebellious streak and I appreciated it in this text.
Mine's Chaucer.
You're still a fan of his Chaucer's satirical eye there, Dale.
Yes, absolutely. I super appreciate this. I really like this, but I'm more of an upbeat guy.
Right.
Chaucer is also my favorite, Dell. I just really enjoy reading those. Like every time that I've read it, because I read it back in high school. Like it's just my favorite.
Because you have good taste.
No, nobody likes the bard best. Poor Shakespeare.
I would like to read more of Shakespeare. I mean, he's considered the best for a reason. I wasn't crazy about King Lear. I like the Twelfth Night, and I appreciated a lot of his sonnets and such. But I would like to read some more of his.
Yeah, I'm working on getting a Shakespeare class started at Southern, like a class just called Shakespeare, where that's all you do is read Shakespeare. I don't. Problem with that is I don't know how many people here would take that. Yeah, it would be very much a niche class, but I am trying to work on getting it off the ground.
I would for sure take it as an elective, but I'm going to state. This is my last semester at Southern.
I would probably take it if my schedule can fit it. That would be fun. But I enjoy reading Shakespeare, but I enjoy acting it more, honestly. It's just really fun.
Like in a drama class?
Yeah, there's a lot of room. Like, I don't know, something about it. When you just add more emotion to it and you really get into it, it just comes to life in a way that I don't even know how to explain.
Well, that's how a lot of his work was meant to be consumed anyways, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep. All right, guys. So now we're going to read one more Renaissance writer before we move to the 18th century. We're going to read some John Donne for next class. So John Donne's poems. So that's what we're going to read for next class. This to give you guys a preview of John Donne. He wrote what's called holy poetry and like hellish poetry almost, right? Like he writes about heavenly subjects and very earthy subjects. I'll be interested to hear what you guys have to say about the content of his poems, especially and how they're divided. He is one of the most famous poets in English lit, so I'm definitely going to look forward to that class. And after that, I'm going to take a look at the calendar and see what all I'm going to cut in the 18th century, since we there will be some cuts since we lost. Yeah, since we did an extra day of Paralyzed Lost. I remember I missed the day too from when I was sick. So yeah, we'll need to make some cuts to 18th century. So I'll get back to you next week on what I'm going to do for that. But for next class, we're definitely going to read the John Dunn poems in the book. So read those over for next time.
As we get up into the 18th century writers, do we continue to have the Christian theme that we've had so far?
Not so much. Not so much. That 18th century lit's my least favorite part of this class. It just is. Like 18th century is when we start to get to the Enlightenment and the Age of Reason and all this stuff, right? So 18th century definitely takes a more secular bend than the first part of this course.
With that, it loses a little bit of its flair because it's like so much more that try to be much more reasoned.
Right. And definitely so. Then if you take Brit Lit 2, the first writers you read in that class are the Romantics, and the Romantics were the Romantics are who loved Milton, but the Romantics was a response to this age of cold reason and all this stuff.
I'd probably appreciate that.
Yeah, if you're curious, if you like Milton and you're curious to read more, read through William Blake's poems, especially William Blake's poems. Yeah, he definitely was one of the advocates for this whole Satan being the hero thing. He did a lot of good Paradise Lost art too. That's something else to look at. Look at some Paradise Lost art. There's a lot of really good art, visual art with Paradise Lost.
I just bought a Paradise Lost book that's been illustrated by Gustave Doré. I think so it was. Also got Divine Comedy with it has all three: the Inferno, the Paragato, and there's three of them. I'm sure you're familiar.
Yeah.
They're illustrated by the same guy. He's supposed to be a famous. He knew Dante evidently, and he did illustrations for Paradise Lost too.
Yeah, so check that out. There's still the question too: why has Paradise Lost never been made into a movie? Right. Well, I think it's pretty. I think after all our discussions, that's pretty obvious, right?
Not only that, how would you do it? A miniseries? It'd be hard to do it in a movie. And then there's a lot of themes and different things in here that would be hard to do nowadays.
Even with like the nudity and stuff, right? That would be hard to do. Even on like HBO or something, that would be hard to do. So from the theology upsetting people to that, I don't think it'll ever happen.
Too taboo. Can I ask you about the essay? Can I still have a day or two on that, or?
Yeah. So turn it if you want to turn the essay in by the end of the week. That's fine with me. Fine with me.
Okay, great.
And that goes for all the rest of you too. So
appreciate it.
All right, guys. We'll see you next class.